It's Bobby Manning. It's Dome Theory. It is Tuesday night as we record this, and my favorite guest. You're my favorite, Justin. There's no
Oh,
way
that's
around it.
awesome.
There's no one I like talking to more than Justin Rowan, but I need an excuse. And the last couple of years, I haven't had many excuses because the Cavs have just been wretched. But now, unbelievably, I ruled them out, Justin, after Collin Sexton went down. I said they are going to be the team that completely slides out of this mix. The 12 teams that were packed together there in the Eastern Conference mix that we have here so far, around 500. Instead, they've risen. I
Mhm.
think they are, 0-4 when Mobley is out? And so
1-4 now.
1
They
and
they did beat the Rockets, but yeah, unfortunately, Mobley went out earlier in the season where it was a stretch where the Cavs played Brooklyn twice, Phoenix, and Golden State. They stayed in all of those games without Mobley, which I think was really impressive. Two of those games they also didn't have Jared Allen. It was a real rough situation, but they managed to hang in with those teams and even have a chance to win. But yeah, they're now 1-4 without Mobley, but those four losses being Brooklyn twice, Golden State, and Phoenix. Which the Phoenix game was really close as well. That came down to a call or two at the end of the game.
so they have not played in 3 days due to COVID.
Hmm.
Um, Very COVID-riddled roster going into this one. Tomorrow, Celtics, Cavaliers playing in Boston tomorrow night for the third time. So for the tiebreaker, I believe they have
Yep.
split the two games in that mini series. There haven't been mini series this year. They had one and they split those two games. Probably should have been a sweep for Boston. They blew the second game
Oh,
epically.
should have been a
Absolute
sweep.
meltdown.
You
What
guys
was
haven't
the
had to play any of our bigs. Come on, man.
what was that meltdown? 19 points. I was at a festival that night. That was the only night that was the only game I haven't watched this season.
That was a lot of fun.
It was a meltdown on the Boston front, and they were sitting a lot of guys. Again, there's no excuses in terms of guys sitting and injured in COVID this
Right.
year because everybody is absolutely demolished. The Celtics have 7 COVID cases. I was just reading Justin the absent list for Cleveland in this one tomorrow. Collin Sexton, of course, out for the year. Isaac Okoro, Lamar Stevens, Dylan Windler, Denzel Valentine, who I believe killed the Celtics in that mini series, and Jared Allen, Evan Mobley as well.
Yep.
So no one is playing for the Cavs tomorrow. It's going to be Kevin Love and whatever else that they can put out there. Taco, Luke Cornett, who we'll get to, as well as Ricky
Little Lauri
Rubio.
Markkanen in action. Lauri got his COVID. Kevin Love and Lauri were out the previous two games against Boston
Mm-hmm.
with COVID at the time. But they're probably going to be leaned on pretty heavily, if I'd have to imagine.
So Darius Garland's got to be an all-star, right? The season he's having is just ridiculous. I saw Perk tweeted he was the second best point guard in the East, and that would have to be behind. Who would you say was the
He was
best?
saying Trey Young. He was
Trae
saying
Young.
Trey Young is the best, which I mean that's
Drew
high praise,
Holiday's
and
up
you could
there
have
too.
that take.
Yeah.
Obviously, you look at the point guards in the Eastern Conference.
Kyle Lowry.
Both of the Ball brothers deserve a lot of credit. I think he's been better than Lowry. I think Lowry's looking a little old this year.
Who is Chicago's point guard? They have like 3.
That it's a great question. However, you're going to go out and define it, but I think Lonzo Ball deserves a lot of credit. Fred Van Vliet has been having a really good year, but
Oh, he
I do
has.
think I do think record is probably going to come into it, but I think both. If I had to pick, I think both Darius Garland and Jared Allen are deserving of All Star this year. I think you look at what Garland's done for this team and the way that the Cavs offense is with him off the court. They basically go from one of the best offenses in the league with him on to the worst with him off. It is a staggering differential from an on-off standpoint. And Jared Allen, while he doesn't have the same on-off splits of Evan Mobley, I think Mobley has impacted the defense more this year. I think what Allen does there is he really helps kind of insulate Evan Mobley, right? Like he takes a lot of that physical beating. His rim protection's been huge, and his offensive numbers have been really good as well. So I think while Mobley might have a bit of a case, you obviously can't give the Cavs 3 All-Stars this year. So I'd probably give the nod to
Why
Garland
not?
and Allen.
No, give them 3 All-Stars. They're right up there in
The
the
league's
top
deeper
of the
now,
net
Bobby.
rating.
We can't do that. I'd love to make the Rudy Gobert case for Evan Mobley, but he's got plenty of All Stars in
Aren't
his
the
future.
Cavs the 3rd best team in net rating? Isn't that what we're talking about right now? Or no, they're
It's
3rd in defense. So they're up there. If this is why I brought up the record off the top. if we're talking the games without Mobley or with Mobley, 18-8, that's right up there with that's up there with Chicago. You're up there with Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Certainly the teams in the West as well. Besides the top two there, they've just been incredible. And now we're past the point where it's a fluke. Like they're going to be a playoff team, I think,
Yep.
barring injuries or setbacks here. At least play in if they slide a little bit. So the turnaround is complete in Cleveland, I'd say. You got the core piece in Mobley, which was just such a great pick. Fortunate that he fell because there was a ton of momentum for him moving up to as high as number one, I would imagine,
Yep.
if Detroit was really skeptical about Cade, and it seemed like they were, and rightfully so, looking at how good this guy is. I was at Summer League, and I find what you just said interesting because he did take a beating in Summer League. I didn't think he
Hmm.
looked that good at all out there, but I also said there were no perimeter shooters around him. There were no ball handlers to set him up, and he was basically handling opposing centers night in and night out.
Yeah.
So it stood to reason that he was going to get beat up out there in those matchups against, I don't know, whether it was Devontae Kaycock or whoever else it was that he ran into out there. Um, but he's just been a defensive menace going up against opposing starting units, contesting, I think, still the most shots in basketball.
Hmm.
Inside out, he's everywhere. He's rebounding. Offensively, probably got some growth that he can show into the future. But
Yep.
defensively, right now, this guy is as good as anyone in the league statistically. It's unreal what he's doing from day one in the league right now. And man, he just makes the Cavs so dynamic on that end.
It's unbelievable. I think like there's no real reason to think that Evan Mobley should be this good defensively because young players take time. Like that was the biggest thing. And if you're talking about like what's the most surprising when it comes to the Cavs this year, it's consistency. There are three teams in the NBA that haven't lost a game by more than 15 points. It's the Warriors, Jazz, and Cavs.
And not only
Uh,
that, they're pounding teams. You look at the last six here, like Bucks by 19,
they
uh,
haven't lost a game where they were favored all season. They
Rockets dominating,
they win every game that they're
11 over the
supposed to
Heat.
win, and they've stayed competitive in a whole lot of games. So it's really surprising to see the level of consistency that they have. You look at stretches even where they were playing like their third game in 4 nights against Milwaukee with all of their guys. That was a game where the Cavs just had nothing offensively, but their defense is so good and so consistent. It kept them in that game. They've gone toe to toe against Utah, where it just came down to Garland missing a shot at the buzzer, right? Like the level of consistency is really, really surprising. And it's the maturity from Mobley. Like Mobley, yeah, Summer League isn't an example of a situation where big men will perform well, but he came from that experience asking the Cavs trainers, "Hey, I need to add weight. I need to get stronger before the NBA season," and
That was a
added
great story, huh?
I think he added like 11 pounds after that, right? And we had Sidney Lowe, the Cavs assistant coach, former coach with the Timberwolves and a whole bunch of other teams. He coached young Garnett. They're using Evan Mobley at the top of 3-2 zones in the Kevin Garnett role as that zone buster because they trust him to go out and defend guards. When I watched him play against Atlanta in Cleveland, like the fact that he was defending Terry Rozier and defending Trey Young and all these guys, like the level of consistency is something that you just don't expect it to translate. Like I was optimistic on this Cavs team, but even I was too low. Like I was predicting 37 wins because I
That's
think
about
that
where I was.
when you're talking about a team with a starting lineup with an average age under 22, that is never consistent in the NBA. So I
Mhm.
for anyone that had skepticism, I think it was well founded.
Yeah, they kind of remind me of last year's Knicks in some ways. Probably a little better version of it too, because you have a dynamic point guard in Ricky Rubio, and what a great move that was.
Yeah.
Jumping off the Jared Allen move, which in itself was incredible. I think we were talking last year shortly after it happened. It was just like, how did they get in on this deal? This is unreal. And they just snuck in and found themselves a franchise center. I was listening to Windhorse on his podcast there, kind of bounce through those moves and get kind of everything that led them to this point. And like that was just such a shrewd thing. They were the team that was going to be able to pay him 100 million, so
Yeah.
they went in and got him. And they also took that Taurean
Yeah, they
Prince.
took the Taurean Prince
contract.
contract.
Yeah.
That was supposed to be the poison pill on that deal, right? And they
It
flipped
wasn't
it
a
with the
big
second
deal. What was it, like 10 million?
17.
Oh, that was a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, 17 mil. And that's one of the
How did he make
fortunate.
s Oh my god, this league with some of the contracts a couple years ago.
I mean, that's one of the fortunate things, and one of the things that stands out when you talk about like Cleveland versus a team like Indiana, where a lot of small markets will have to kind of make those cost considerations. They're not able to eat big contracts, and the Cavs, whether they're good or not, they've always had a big payroll. They will take big contracts on for picks, and that was one of the ways that Kobe Altman was able to restock the cabinet. And well, credit needs to be given to him for that. Some of that comes from ownership too, right? Like the willingness to, even when you're a bad team and you're losing 60 games a year, to go out and spend money to take on bad contracts, to get picks and use those picks to get someone like Jared Allen. It's noteworthy, right? Like that's a big part of this turnaround story for the Cavs.
So they did make the Lauri Markkanen move too, which I didn't
Yep.
love as much, and he's been up and down, in and out. Have you enjoyed that experience? Is he part of this picture long term? Because I look at a triple big team and I don't love it historically, whether it was those weird Pistons teams or I'm trying to think of another example too. There's been a few over the
Yep.
last 10 years or so, but uh, he seems like the awkward piece in all of this because you expect him to be this shooter at that position and mix in with some lineups as a spacing four. Hasn't really done that, and he fits in with the defense here.
He's I think you're selling him a little short. Like Lauri Markkanen is having a great year for the Cavs. Like when they traded for Lauri Markkanen, the way that I framed it was not that Markkanen was going to come in and replace Larry Nance. The gamble that they made was that Evan Mobley was going to be able to replace the production that Larry Nance Jr. provided. What
Hmm.
Lauri Markkanen was supposed to do, in my opinion, was to come in and replace Kevin Love. Because last year, Kevin Love was not able to stay healthy when he went to Team USA. He was not able to get healthy for Team USA. His body was betraying him. I think people thought it was a Blake Griffin in Detroit situation. He flat out couldn't stay healthy. 1920, he was healthy and productive for the Cavs the entire year. So I think they understood that they needed a spacing big, and Lauri Markkanen was going to be that guy. Now, Kevin Love came in happy, healthy, and productive. He's willing to come off the bench and play 18 to 20 minutes a night, play hard in those minutes. And because that starting lineup needed spacing and there just isn't a true wing on this roster outside of maybe Jetty Osman, who is performing well in the second unit with Ricky Rubio and structure. You want to keep him in that role. So what JB Bickerstaff did was, okay, I'm going to get mocked for it on the front end, but I'm going to gamble. I'm going to put him out there because Lauri Markkanen at the small forward is at least long as a defender, right? And when
Yep.
he gets beat, all he has to do is rotate onto the next perimeter player because Jared Allen or Evan Mobley are able to rotate and to cut off and to defend that small forward. If they didn't have Mobley and Allen as kind of that defensive focal point and those guys on the interior, you could not make Lauri Markkanen at the three work defensively. I just don't think that there's any way to do it. But Lauri Markkanen has come out and he's played hard. He's doing the little things like early in the season, his shot wasn't falling, but he was getting steals. He was defending Paul George, and Paul George is like, would have an off night and credit Lauri Markkanen, like things you would not expect and associate with him. He's contributing in those ways. So if I had to guess, I don't think Lauri's going to be a long-term part of this team. I think that if there is going to be a move for the Cavs at some point, Lauri Markkanen's contract, and especially the way that he continues to kind of rehab his value and remake what he's been around the league, I think that's an attractive trade chip for someone at 24 years old. But in the meantime, he's just doing whatever's been asked of him and been a really productive player.
How much does he make?
I think it's like I think it was reported around 15. It goes up a couple over the next few years.
Over
Like I
4
think it goes from
years.
like 18 to 18 or 15 to 18 or something along those lines. But for the production you're getting, like that's not bad. Like I sure would rather have Lauri Markkanen than Dorian Prince. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and the clock was ticking in some ways on Nance. That was probably a good way to funnel him off into something bigger and better here. We'll see where it goes, right? Because I look at that player and I say this is towards something else. I don't think he's part of the long-term plan here.
Agreed.
They obviously are going to need more of a dynamic wing. And Isaac Okoro, listen, I wanted him in Boston more than anyone else in that class. They couldn't find a way to move up. In Cleveland, I thought just completely stole him at the position that they did there. He is going to be, in my mind, a Jimmy Butler, Jaylen Brown type player once his offense rounds out, because the defense is there already. You got a little bit of the ball handling flashes with him, and he's had some of the best dunks this year too. He's just one of my favorite young players in the league right now. So you just look at the amount of talent that Cleveland has stacked up this time. They've finally done the post LeBron thing right, and
Who would have thought, eh?
You're gonna completely shut this down, but in a couple of years, is LeBron gonna look at this situation again and say, something intriguing here for me. Maybe this is where I want to end my career.
You never know. The Lakers might do the right thing and buy him out so he can go play for a contender. There's
He'll
probably
always have the option.
there's a nice spot off the bench for LeBron if you ever want to come back. But no, I don't think that's going to happen. I'd be a little surprised. Maybe like a Dwayne Wade final year retirement type thing down the road. But I don't think that that's 2 years away. I think if I had to guess, he's probably going to ride it out in LA.
Let's do a Collin Sexton for LeBron James sign and trade this summer. We'll get the Lakers the point guard they need. So is Sexton going to be part of this picture going forward? I mean, they're looking fine without him, and he wasn't the greatest fit as the point of attack guy, I thought, for them. Just too much of a black hole. He scored well, but that's really all he did.
I think that notion is a little dated, and this is part of why I'm heartbroken that he got hurt this year. Because you look at last year, Sexton 24 points, 4.5 assists, like
It's
really
great scoring.
Yeah, really improved his playmaking, especially like you're talking about an off-guard player getting 4.5 assists. That's not like black hole. That's not Gary Trent Jr. or some other guy that never passes the ball, right? Like that is legitimate secondary playmaking. And he came into this season and his usage rate was still the same. It was around 26% as 2019-20, but he had the ball in his hands way less. He was playing as a cutter. He was playing as a defender. He was a spot up guy. Like he was doing all these little things and changing his game. Because at the end of the day, like I think Collin Sexton is just a guy that is dedicated to winning. And when it comes to his future, I think it's a little murky. I think with him getting hurt, I would probably rule out a trade because I do think that the Cavs really value him as a player. Like I think he is part of the future, in the sense of he's either going to be part of the future as an important piece, or he'll be moved to add an important piece. Like I don't think that he would be moved for spare parts or flexibility or to save money or anything along those lines. I think it would be part of a larger deal to bring in an established young player. I'm crushed that Sexton tore his meniscus this year because I really think that he was playing well. I think this would have been a great proof of concept year to see how you could do with two smaller guards along with the bigs. I know everyone points at like the Cavs taking off without Sexton. That's not really the case. Like they were 7-4 with Sexton.
No, they're not taking off without him. They're sustaining what they were doing, I'd say.
Right. And I think that can be instructive, right?
But
like
Garland's taking off without him. That's the key.
Right. But at the same time, Darius Garland got hurt 3 minutes into the season against Memphis, missed the next 2 games. Okoro hurt his hamstring. And it took Garland a little while to kind of get back into a rhythm and to recover from that injury. So that early sample size where they went 7-4 with Sexton, I think they're only 3 games above 500 without him. Like I don't think there's a massive change, but I do think that it is instructive when you learn how to play well without somebody, right? Like I think there are takeaways, and the trick is going to be to figure out how malleable Collin Sexton is, whether he can adjust to a new role. In all likelihood, like if Isaac Okoro continues this progression, you're not going to mess up that starting lineup and change things up. And him coming off the meniscus surgery, you might need to bring him along slowly. So it may be a 6-man role, which he was already kind of in a lot of ways. He was always that first sub off the court, playing primarily with the second unit, staggering with Darius Garland. Whether he's starting or not, I expect him to be in that role. But I don't think that this is somebody that isn't part of the Cavs' plans. Like whether it is part of a large package or as having a prominent role either off the bench or with the starting unit, I think he is a part of the Cavs' future.
Justin, if you don't know, if you're not a regular on this program, does host the official Cavaliers podcast, the Chase Down with Carter Rodriguez. We're hopefully gonna have Carter on here one day. I always end
Yeah.
up going to you. We'll get Carter on for the playoff series. There'll be the 3-6 between the Celtics and
Ooh.
Cavs, unbelievably. Uh, I don't know what the East is going to look like in the end.
Yeah.
We'll turn over the Celtics in a second. I don't know how much you've watched of them this year. I don't think you'll have too much of a different take on them than last year, which is just crazy. Like that, we're watching the same thing essentially with them and Brown and Tatum and where they're at as players and where the roster is constructed by a new GM, but essentially the same story this year.
It's another year of Boston not being more than the sum of their parts, and like that is one of the things we want to see in Cleveland is for this team to finally be
That's
more
such
than
a
the sum of
great
their
way
parts.
to put it. Yeah.
Because let's look at it. Like if you look at a potential series, like I think the best two players at this point, I would say, are Brown and Tatum.
Hmm.
But after that, it's probably like Garland, Mobley, Allen, like those guys and whatnot. But the way that the Cavs work off of one another and the way that they like work as a collective, like it's very clear. Boston still needs playmaking. Like I think giving more of an offensive load to Marcus Smart, I was okay with that in the offseason, but you need a real point guard. And it seems like every single guard they bring in is a scoring guard, right? Like he's a combo guard. It's not a connecting piece. And it's unfortunate. I like bringing back Al Horford because that's going to bring some playmaking in the front court. They could potentially play off.
They
JC
wanted Ball bad. It just wasn't happening.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate that it didn't work out in that way, but, like, it it's just another one of those situations where it's tricky, right? Like, you have those cornerstone pieces, and finding the right guys to supplement their talent is the tricky part, and, I wasn't expecting the Cavs to be so far along that process already. The fact that they have kind of 3 cornerstone guys that play so well off of each other already is really encouraging, but I mean, as much as you'd like Boston to be better, having the best wing tandem in the NBA, a young wing tandem, I should say, isn't a bad starting point. Like you're not in that terrible of a position.
It sort of feels like a last hanging thread more than a good starting point. Like just so
Yeah.
much has been washed out of here, and they were ahead of the curve when they were winning there in 2017 or 2018. 19 should have been better range, but they still ended up making the second round that year just because of how much talent was there. And
Yeah.
then the wave just soaked everything out, from Horford to Kyrie to Gordon Hayward being the final stab at them being a real contender in the East. And I
God,
think
even if
people
they added Ricky
understated that.
Rubio, like even if you had Ricky Rubio, who's not a
You
star,
think?
but like a connecting piece,
You
I
think
think that
that's
would
all it takes?
I think when you have Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown, yeah, like I know I said it before, but that is the best young wing tandem in the NBA. Those guys are fantastic, and you get a connecting piece there. I think it makes a huge difference. I think someone with the savvy, with the locker room presence, because that's the other thing. You need a locker room leader, like a veteran that can kind of give a new perspective. Because the locker room voices they have are ones that have been there for a while. And I think
Mhm.
sometimes fresh eyes and a strong voice can make a real big difference.
I wonder where Smart falls in that, and I've talked about this with a variety of guests on this show of whether he's the guy that kind of needed to go out the door in terms of changing the point guard position, cashing in on his value. Again, I think that structure of that deal would have been Smart for Ball, sending Smart down to New Orleans. It's just Ball wanted to go to Chicago, and there was no way around that for New Orleans. So they had that, and I think a lot of people wish Smart could become something better and package up into a more facilitating oriented point guard, more offensively oriented guy who can connect everything here. But the fact of the matter is he's the best defensive point guard in the league, or right up there with any of the other guys. And he doesn't have the value to flip up into a Kyle Lowry or Lonzo Ball or anything like that right now. And you're not just going to throw him away for the sake of throwing him away, because he's still brings you a ton of value. He's a good passer. He's the best passer on the roster, and he has you being one of the best defenses in the league every year except last year. I think last year was kind of an injury anomaly for him. So Smart still plays a big role in here. I mean, he leads the league in steals, and he's just back to diving on the floor and doing everything for you that you need. He chased down this ridiculous jump ball into the backcourt and just like completely smashed his body off the floor and gave the Celtics an extra possession, trailing by 7 against Golden State late. That is just like, this is why you love this guy. But he's not connecting Brown and Tatum. And when you talk about the room, the accountability and the different things that they're looking for in that aspect, the consistency creator, he's trying like hell to do it. You heard him call them out against Chicago much earlier in the season, but it's not working. And I think he's just one of those voices, like you said, that's gotten tired here. And your point about the sum of the parts, you look at, I think I said something like this similar to you last year too. And it's even more so this year. You have Schroeder playing outstanding, especially relative to that contract that they got him on. Horford coming in and playing he's all defense, I think, if the season ended today. Horford shut down Mobley 0 of 11 in that game where he did appear there.
I think Freedom did some work to shut down Mobley in that game as well. Celtics do seem to have a history of
Freedom
injuring Cavs power forwards in an attempt to defend them.
I had to let you slide that in. Freedom, best clean the glass, best on-off player in basketball percentage-wise for the first couple of games that he played this year. It wasn't a big sample size, but he was rolling. I'm just trying to think of what else is going well here. Smart. Tatum's been phenomenal the last week or two here. Brown started great, missed all that hamstring time. And they've had a couple other guys contributing here or there too. So the sum of the parts just aren't coming together for it to be anything more than a 500 team again. And it's been laborious following this team win, loss for 2 seasons now. And I don't know, like if you're the GM of Boston right now, how would you shake it up?
Oh man, that's such a tricky question because how do you make a high impact move without moving one of those 2 wings, right? Like that's
Everybody's asking for Brown.
And yeah, justifiably so. Like if I'm like coming from a Cavs perspective, I would absolutely, like, outside of Garland, Mobley, and Allen, like if I could put together like Lauri Markkanen, Collin Sexton,
I was just
Isaac
thinking of
Okoro,
Sexton, yeah. Like,
first
what would it
round
take for
picks,
Sexton?
like pepper some first round picks in there, like absolutely, like bring in Jaylen Brown. Like I'm here for it, but I don't think that that's what they're going to do. I don't think I would break up those guys. Like that's just the tricky thing, though, right? Like. Do you find like is Marcus Smart even eligible to be traded this year? I can't recall. I don't believe so, right?
End of January.
End of January, okay. Like you might have to go into one of those situations where you are mortgaging your future, where it's 3 firsts, 3 swaps, that sort of thing. Like if you
That's
have
what
that
I've said. I think that's what you have to do when you have these guys and they're becoming free agents in 2 years in Brown's case. A couple summers from now, Brown will be a free agent. The summer after that, Tatum would be. So once this year ends, the clock's officially ticking on those guys. We've said, wait, they're young, and 2 seasons have gone by, and that is the killer of these last 2 years. Just so much wasted time. Young guys haven't developed. Those 2 haven't had an opportunity to compete and win. Stay healthy. They've been driven heavy minutes. Luckily, Tatum hasn't gotten hurt, but Brown has missed a ton of games from the load he's carrying.
Yeah.
And you just haven't moved at all. You just keep taking a step forward, step back, and we're 2 years into this. It's so much wasted time. So you got to take a risk. You do, and it might be Brown. I know I had a Knicks guy on, Tommy Beer, who said he would do Brown for Lillard, and that would obviously be the most Portland could get for Lillard.
I went. Here's a take. I think Damian Lillard's done. I think he's toast. Like I think
toast. Be careful.
I think he's toast. I think he's toast. Like that abdominal
I'll be clipping
issue,
this one.
that abdominal issue is a real problem. I think there's like,
what is it? A bad strain?
He apparently he's going to need surgery on it. Like it's at least I think I've seen that reported. Like I just would not trust that. Like, and again, this
he
is
wants
a small
$50 million a year too.
Right. That's the other thing, right? Like, I think there's a real situation where that turns into a John Wall type contract. And I think the rule changes hurt him too. Like I think a lot of his misses were free throws in past years, and now all of a sudden they're just misses, right? That's a guy like I talked about how Kevin Love didn't look right physically at Team USA. Dame didn't look right for Team USA, and when you are like, if you are moving one of, well, obviously it would be Brown, it wouldn't be Tatum, but if you're moving him, you want someone that's going to have a longer window than what Damian Lillard has left. I would not be moving Jaylen Brown for Damian Lillard. I know that's a hot take, but I wouldn't.
Yeah, you don't have a take on who's or you don't have a choice on who's available though, and
That's
Lillard's
that's the tricky thing, right? Like the market isn't great. Like if you're just giving out 3 picks and 3 swaps, that's not going to get you Ben Simmons. Like it's
he's a particular.
and that's a flawed option, right? Like that is a very flawed option. Like guys become available for a reason. It's either they're banged up, the situation hasn't worked out, and all of a sudden, like the player isn't happy and whatnot. Like there aren't great options because great options don't become available. And I can say that even as Jaylen Brown, like him, if he hit the market, like I'd be thinking, what the hell? Like that's not a player, a type of player that hits the market ever, right? So
He's not.
it's
He's not either. Like everything they say is that they haven't even thought about it, and I
right.
don't think they would do it in a million years. The kind of package you threw out there, like Markkanen, Sexton, picks, things like that. That's where you end up. I think if you do make him available, is you're selling low on him. You're
Yeah.
taking like a selling package, almost like a
You'd be
rebuilding
taking
team
Isaac
would be.
Okoro, banking on the hope that he could become like 85% Jaylen Brown, right? Which
I was actually looking at Memphis in that regard. Like, could you end up with Jackson, Brooks, and one of those like Brandon Clark, Desmond Bain, Desmond
man,
Bain, because he put the Celtics cap on and they trade him the dump Cantor. So then you end up selling low for that. The mistakes that Ainge made on the way out were just unbelievable, but that's a different story. So that's the kind of deal you're making for Brown at that juncture, like you said.
keep
What
him,
you have right now that makes you
keep him.
feel good is that you have those two guys. Yeah, once you lose it, you're done. Like you just have one guy, and then you're not even really that special. All you have that makes you even a borderline contender if things break right now is those two players.
I mean, the reality is like you'll only get so many opportunities. And this was actually something we were talking about on the chase down, right? Like because one of the big things with the Cavs is how aggressive do you get trying to supplement talent around kind of the big three that they've developed, right? And you have to be really careful because even when you have a rookie that's ahead of the timeline like Evan Mobley, if you cash in and the guy you cash in on is Kristaps Porzingis, you're in Dallas's position. When you're
Yes.
Boston and you have these two dynamic, awesome wings, and you cash in on Kyrie Irving, I thought that was going to work out. It was really working out the first year. I thought he played really well, and things got weird. That fell
You know what
apart.
the funny thing
Then
is?
you take another swing, and it's Kemba Walker, and that doesn't work out. Like you only have so many swings when it comes to roster construction before you've run out of your future assets, and you have to shake things up.
Yeah, and like how far do those picks even carry you if you do package all of them together? I've been screaming that from the mountaintop for 2 years. Just get rid of the picks and package them for whatever you can there. The picks
Mhm.
don't do you any good. The guys aren't ready and they haven't drafted well in general. That's why you have Grant, Romeo, Pritchard, and Neesmith on this team at the bottom who can't even play. So I don't know where that's going to get you. I'm sure they've talked about some of them for guys out there. It's just you're that middling team that even a rebuilding team looks at probably and says like, all right, if we can get some deep into the future, that might be enticing. And just
Mhm.
because Celtics could be off the map at that point, but this year, next year, those are late first round picks that don't get you much at all. I'm intrigued by Sabonis. I love Sabonis's fit with this team. High post creator, low post scorer. They haven't had that at all. You think of Rob and
I've
Horford.
got a
They
take for you. I've got another take for you. Sorry to cut you
Mhm.
off. I'd like Turner more for you guys.
Really.
I think you need the defense
How
more.
about that one? If you did this,
For
boom,
Gordon
Hayward to
Hayward,
Turner was done. It was
if
done.
you with the benefit of hindsight, if you could have added Miles
It
Turner
was
for Gordon Hayward,
there. Ainge wanted
not
more.
great,
They waited too long.
not great.
I'm gonna get in trouble because there's a whole lot of bickering in the Celtics fan base about that. But
But
at the
I'd prefer him
very
over Sabonis because Sabonis, I think everybody was like, with Sabonis, what we have is Jokic light, right? Like, okay, he's going to be like this facilitator and whatnot. He's Vucevic. Like that's what it really is. You're not talking about Jokic light, you're talking about another Vucevic. Vucevic
And he
is a
doesn't
very good
do
player.
like
He can raise your ceiling. But I still think ultimately, like, if you get Miles Turner in there, if you could give up assets for Miles Turner, I would target him first. It's unfortunate that Malcolm Brogdon isn't available to be traded this year because, like, if Boston could find a way to get like Brogdon and Turner, give up like Smart, your young players, a bunch of
you could
picks and
still
stuff
do
like
that in
that.
the offseason.
Yeah, but I'm talking about strictly for this season, right?
Uh,
Like, I think Brogdon would be really, really interesting and someone that works well. But I think your backbone has to be defense. So for that reason, I would prioritize Miles Turner over Sabonis because I think Sabonis leaves you too vulnerable on the inside. And especially when you look at the composition of teams in the Eastern Conference, Giannis is attacking the rim at every single play. Embiid is going to eat you alive if you have Sabonis out there. Team like Cleveland, like an up and coming team like Cleveland, like they play inside out. They attack the rim. Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, these guys are attacking the basket. They would eat Sabonis alive. I
I've
think you
seen those
have to
guys eat
protect that.
Turner alive too, though, especially Embiid. I like Rob. If we're talking those two,
I understand that, but there's
yeah.
degrees to this, right? Like
Uh-huh.
there's yeah, Turner has been abused in the past, but if you're picking between those two, I would prioritize him.
I like him in concept. I think of what his game is in my head. A passing big who can run sets a little bit here, shoot a little bit. He does a little bit of everything from that position. His defense is obviously phenomenal. But offensively, I just haven't seen it all come together for him. And he's still fairly young, right? He got a big contract early on that I think scared some teams away when it came to them trying to sell him a couple years ago. Even the Celtics in that regard, I don't think they fell in love with him in that Hayward conversation. But now that I think about just the consistency that they need in there and just having a third guy who passes a little bit and defends a little bit, I just don't know if that raises your ceiling all that much. Like I think of Sabonis and the way he can improve in a system where he's the more central big offensively, at least, because I think you're going to need a big time third offensive scorer alongside the Jays who can also pass, who can also do a few things for you there. Turner's offense to me is just comes and goes a little too much. Like, yes, he'll be a staple for this team defensively, but they're already kind of getting that from Horford, from Rob, who's just been sensational on the defensive end this year. Um, and they kind of like what he can become too. So I just don't know if that's the consolidation move you make there. You know what they're honestly doing is praying for Beal. Like praying that he wants to play with Tatum that badly that that's the only place he's going to want to go once that time comes for him. I honestly think that's what they're waiting for.
I- And I'd rather have Brown than Beal. Like, and again, like Beal's another guy that his numbers have taken a hit with honest basketball and the change in officiating. You look at the difference in age. Like he's not 30 yet, but he's going to be 29. Like if you're trading for him when he's 29, like I don't think he addresses what you need. Like I think you need someone that's a better passer than him. Like I know he averages kind of over 5, 6 assists a game, but I think you need a guy that ties everything together. I think this team really, really needs a real point guard. Like that's what it comes down to. You guys need a real point guard.
I wouldn't mind Brogdon and Turner coming over if it was together. That would definitely be a different looking deal.
Yeah,
Leverrett's interesting too. I like the way he looked just to make it more of a three-wing situation in Brooklyn.
yeah,
He's just another guy though that's ball in his hands. He's going to score, but he's not going to connect anything with the other wings there. You're
yeah.
so right. Like the consistency factor, the connection, the sum of parts, like that all just goes back to the point guard situation and just the ball handling on this team. And they are trying like hell to get Tatum to be that guy. I think he's put everything he possibly can into it, but it just naturally isn't what he is. And it's certainly not naturally what Brown is as he starts to step into that playmaking water.
Yeah, like you look at the guys that you're talking about bringing in and whatnot, and it's like, okay, I can see what a Bradley Beal adds to this team. I can see what Dame theoretically adds to this team. I don't think it's more than what Brown brings to the table. Like I'm just that high on
Well,
Brown.
this
And I think at a lesser cost, bringing in a real point guard is going to give you an elevated Brown and Tatum, and that is going to help you become more than some of the parts. It's not might not be a sexy name. I don't think they have the flexibility to do that, but I think bringing in someone like that really helps make this team whole, because there are good parts, like you mentioned. Robert Williams playing so well, Tatum Brown, like Horford's playing well in the meantime. Like I
Need
think
a little
there's some interesting.
shooting. That's all they're missing. Josh Richardson's giving it to them, but yeah, he's in and out of the lineup, and he's not a shooting pedigree guy. Like
Mhm.
they're still just dying for that Duncan Robinson, Buddy Hield, like floor spacer that's just going to give those guys a ton of room. I find it interesting you pointed to a Rubio type guy, because I think Stevens learns from Ainge in this approach that we're making the big splash. Only the player that's going to move the needle toward championship. And if you have a big three like that, Beal, Tatum, Brown, if Beal ended up forcing his way there somehow and they didn't have to give up Brown, that would put you in that conversation. They've avoided those type of Rubio moves. Like could you have just brought Rubio on the TP after you lost Hayward there with a pick or
Yeah.
something, whatever it would have been? They haven't looked at doing stuff like that, changing the bottom end of the roster, bringing in a bench guy, even though a couple years ago. And those can be moves that solidify teams. Like they're not going to launch you up among the contenders like a Brooklyn or a Golden State, but they're going to solve a lot of your problems and make you more consistent and probably accentuate the stars so they can get better more easily. And they just haven't done much of that. Like Fournier snuck in for a game or two last year, and he actually helped them a lot, just with the spacing and secondary scoring they gave them, but he wasn't there long enough. Richardson has helped them to some degree. He's that kind of guy, but not high level enough. So, like, I just don't think those are the kind of moves that they've looked at hard enough. And to Cleveland's credit, like Allen, you wouldn't have looked at him as making you a championship contender, but it's just a good move to make because he's a good player.
Yeah.
Same thing with Rubio in that regard. And then, you go get some lower end of rotation guys, and all of a sudden you have a Cleveland team that no one expected at all to be a winning team, much less a top half home court level team. But here they are. Like, there's no reason they can't get home court.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And I think bringing in those supplemental pieces, like especially when you are talking about developing young players, getting veterans that might not be the sexiest name, but it keeps you in more close games. And then that gives your younger guys winning experience, right? Like whether they excel in those situations or if they fail, that is all something. It gives you more productive game tape, right? Like when you are only in close games, that's constructive for the coaches to bring to the table, right? Like, and Boston, like, yeah, the last time that they won a championship, it was by making a splash, but it was also the role players that kind of filled in the glue that made such a big difference. Your Leon Poe, your Glenn Davis, like all of these guys helped
Rondo.
contribute to that, right? Like exactly, yeah. Rondo wasn't even a prominent force at that time when they won a championship, and Eddie House was maybe closing some games and whatnot, right? Like it takes a full rotation. I think only focusing on those big splashes is a little short-sighted in some ways too, because if you are making those smaller moves and putting those guys, like let's say putting a guy like Ricky Rubio in a better situation where he's really displaying himself well, you help elevate their trade value as well to help make you make a splash, right? Like if you're just holding on to your assets and there's no tangible product out on the court, it's harder to make a consolidating move to bring in a top talent, right? Like finding role players that you think complement your stars well, that will look better in your situation, helps elevate them as trade assets. So I think sometimes you have to look at kind of those doubles and those singles, right? Because it's not a home run, but it still might help you score a run in the long term.
So still no answers there, no deal. I usually try to come up with a deal with my guests on a topical game note here, but I don't think there's a deal to be had between Boston and Cleveland unless you
No,
want to
you
chime
can
in.
get no, don't rush that so far fast. Come on, you
I
can
know
give me
what you
Jalen
want.
Brown. You can give me Jalen Brown. Give me what I want. Give me what I want. You can have Lauri Markkanen, and you can have Isaac Okoro. You can have picks. No, I'm kidding.
This conversation is over. I'm gonna
I
sell some.
don't. I also I've stayed out of the fake trade game for the most part too, because like
Oh,
it's so
I'm all
tricky.
in.
It's so tricky. And here's the other thing. Like I there's so many people that role play GMs when they're doing podcasts and whatnot. Me, like especially with the chase down, I found it so much easier to just focus on the game. Let's talk about like what internal improvements you can make to become a better team and whatnot. What changes you can make without the big shakeups. Because at the end of the day, too, like if any of us were pitched a trade that has occurred in the NBA before it occurs, we would always say it's crazy. Like if I told you, oh, the Cavs are going to trade Dante Exum and the Bucks pick for Jared Allen, you are going to laugh at me. You're going to look
I
at me
do
like I'm
have
insane.
I do have a feather in my cap on Kemba for Horford. I was throwing that around early in the
Look at you
summer.
go. Look at you go.
So
Well, I
I'm
have
probably 1 for 25.
I did speak, and this you might need to be careful here. I did speak Jared Allen and Lauri Markkanen into the Cavs into existence. I was
You like
pitching those
the
guys
concept of
forever.
them, yeah.
I like the concept of them together. Obviously, I didn't expect Evan Mobley to come into the equation, so that kind of changed things. But I have been trying my absolute hardest to speak Brandon Ingram and Jaylen Brown into existence because I think that would be the missing piece for this Cavs team.
Ingram's an interesting one. I don't know what the Pelicans are gonna do with everything going on there. I guess they're just gonna sit on what they have and then figure out if they're gonna move on with that GM or not here. But
If
Ingram
you're
would
talking
be
about a pick trade, like, and future assets, and they're shutting Zion down for the year, and they just kind of want to, get another high pick and whatnot. Absolutely, because I cannot think of a player like I can't think of a player like if you built one in a lab, maybe Jason Tatum, but that fits better between like Garland, Okoro, Ingram, Mobley, Allen. Like that starting lineup would be ridiculous.
they're lucky that Zion has to take that extension just due to his health because
Oh my god,
he'd
that
be
is
the
such a
first
bad situation.
guy. He'd be the first guy looking at that 1 year and then out after the rookie deal.
Yeah, I mean, looking back at it, and they had the first and fourth pick in the 2019 draft, and they took Zion, then they traded back for Jackson Hayes and Nickeil Alexander Walker
Ah,
when they could have taken Darius Garland. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, New
even
Orleans
DeAndre
Pelicans.
Hunter, who has never been on the
Even
court.
Hunter, Tyler Hero, any of those guys would have made a bigger difference there. Like
Romeo
it's
Langford? No, not that guy.
maybe not Romeo
Yeah.
Langford.
Oh, Romeo. I wish he could. 24 minutes yesterday, 0 points. It's like, oh, and they still have him. But whatever. Let's sell some ads. Com.com. I told you about it last night from the Garden. We'll be back there again tomorrow night. It is holiday week, so calm down after your hectic days going from work to shopping to wrapping, whatever you got to do this holiday season to get through to Christmas. On Saturday, end your day with meditation, relaxation, sleep, all the stuff that LeBron James is even delivering your way. Have you listened to any of the LeBron meditations, Justin?
No, I meditate without any
All right.
help, but I have relied on the past apps like Calm to help get me to the point where I can do my breathing exercises on my own.
Yeah.
It's been very helpful in the pandemic. You can probably tell I've got more grays than I started this thing with.
I know. I wasn't even going to comment on that because I got a few myself. I'm not in position,
Well,
and I am
some
younger
of
than you.
that's this light right ahead of me too. That when you got the dark hair going, it looks a little more gray than it
So
is. But
slow your graying with Calm and help CLNS and don't dairy. Calm.com/garden, 40% off a premium subscription. We're actually about to talk about a stressful topic before we send Justin out of here. So this is our minute to calm down here. And if you are searching for help this holiday season, LinkedIn is the way to go. You can post your first job for free, linkedin.com/garden. Give them a look as well if you are in need for help. And I know obviously a ton of businesses are in need of help now, the way the job market's going. So linkedin.com/garden, hundreds of millions of people are on LinkedIn. So go, they're going to help you find the candidates that fit your position. And listen, everybody uses LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. Justin's on LinkedIn. Everybody's on LinkedIn.
yeah.
So put your job on there. Do it for free with linkedin.com/garden. COVID. Why don't we talk about COVID for 1 second? Everyone's going to leave the stream here. No one wants to hear about it, but it's gotten so crazy that I do want to talk about it a little bit. This G League free-for-all, we touched on it. I think that's such an interesting thing. Doc and Ime had the funniest quotes last night before Sixers Celtics of just like the random guys that are pitching for these hardship exception deals. Doc saying like, this guy isn't ready to play. And Ime like saying the assistant coaches in the back were putting their film things together. This one's so fun. Like you don't know who is going to end up on rosters over the next month or two here on 10-day deals. And it's great for the G League guys. Like it is just phenomenal. So that is kind of a cool silver lining to all this, but it's nowhere near just how awful it is seeing a new star go down every single day, not knowing if these guys are symptomatic, going through what Embiid did, or just forced out of multiple games as teams are trying to find their rhythm and win key tiebreakers and stuff. Everybody on Twitter is asking for a pause. For obvious reasons, that's just not the solution here, even though like everybody just wants to fire up the tweet and say that that's the way this should go. But this is getting crazy. I mean, rosters are decimated. I read the Cavs lineup tomorrow. This game is just a mess between these two here. It's not even worth talking about, really. And this is the season we have now. I don't know if this gets any better before April. There's probably gonna.
I think it gets better before April. When you look at
once they all go through it.
I think this next month is going to be really rough for us. But this is spreading. You look at Omicron; it is spreading at a ridiculous rate. It is obviously vaccination helps with not experiencing symptoms or whatnot, but it's really unfortunate that we get a variant that spreads and you can catch it when you're vaccinated, right? Like that changed the equation for this season. But when you look at the way that it's just ripped through the league here, like there's only so many players that it can hit. And maybe there's another variant that doesn't matter if you got infected with this one that comes along the way. I try not to focus on that too much because one of the ways that I've coped with this pandemic is focusing on what I can control and whatnot. Obviously, I think everybody wants what's best for the players and whatnot. But this is why they have a players union, right? Like to make these to represent the collective, to voice their opinions and go forward with this. And whether it's the NBA or any other business, we've all had to figure out how to take calculated risks and figure out like how we can run the closest to normal possible. And unfortunately right now it means that we're going to get replacement players for a little while. That teams are going to go through their stretches with outbreaks. It's going to, from an analysis standpoint, it's going to require some context of, our net rating isn't as good as it was, but we were out 10 days here where we were just missing all our guys, right? Like it's going to happen. It's going to hit every single one of these teams. We'll know
that's
it's
the
bad.
good thing about it is it's pretty even and fair, I guess, the way it's going across all the rosters.
Like it sucks. It sucks. I know from a Cavs perspective, if it has to happen at some point, I'm happy it happened now because they just don't have a lot of games over the stretch. They had multiple stretches where they were playing 6 games in 9 nights, like back-to-back stretches like that. If that would have hit at that point, that would have been really difficult. And they had some injuries and stuff that they were going through in those stretches, but you look at it now, this game against Boston is going to be a real tough test with the guys they have available. Next game is Sunday on Boxing Day against Toronto, who's decimated with Van Vliet, Gary Trent Jr., Pascal Siakam out. Like that might just be, a G League showcase game. We don't know what's going to happen, but we'll know it's bad. We will know it's bad when some team signs the chair that Yi-Zhen Lien practiced against for his draft workout. When that chair is on the court, then we really have a
Thanks for answering my question ahead of time. I was going to ask what the best replacement player name that you can come up with there. That's actually pretty good. I don't even think I can match that one. Can we get, like, I'd like to see Yao Ming out there maybe again. Like, that one's probably a little too old. Isaiah could have been in Boston. How great would that have been for 10 days? That would have been an awesome spectacle. Him.
Do you think you trust them?
Listen, I think he was more than willing to come back to Boston and wanted to. And Marcus Smart was actually saying you vouch for him, and it just didn't work. I don't think they want to put the coach in that position of the fan base just going
definitely a tough spot,
nuts and calling for him. They had that with Taco. Like Brad was talking a lot of just how crazy the whole Taco thing got, and he had to put him in the certain games because the crowd was going nuts, and it was just like, this is a terrible situation for me and him.
Yeah. It's like it happens with the Cavs too, and is
it happening there too?
Yeah, it's a little uncomfortable. I don't necessarily love it, but like the thing with Taco is all the players say like he's beloved in the locker room. He's such a great teammate. He's such a good,
and he's improving fast. He's gotten so much better since
he's been
in the league.
Yeah, he's been legitimately good in the G League as well. So we might see him tomorrow. Who knows? Like,
the ovation.
We might get slammed with.
He is going to get.
We might get another slam of positive tests tomorrow. Like it's really hard from a content standpoint, and like the way that I'm treating it is basically like to handle it like injuries, because there's so many unknowns, and I don't want to be like, when something's a layup where like the consensus, everybody's on the same page, like nobody wants players to get sick. I feel like analysts too often, what ends up happening is we all have to go to extremes to show how much we care, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like, and I don't doubt that anyone actually cares about this. This is scary as hell. This sucks. I
And
understand
a
that it's
lot,
more, but there's a lot of
and
unknown.
in the
But like,
garden yesterday, on top of all this, an evacuation alarm went off seconds before tip-off,
oh
and I
my
was just
god,
like,
someone had a great tweet that someone stepped on the they stepped on Lucky, and that's why the evacuation notice went
well,
off.
I was there, and I'm coming out of the bathroom, and all of a sudden this is like going off, and I'm like, did the league just get shut down again? Like, remember the scene in what was it, Oklahoma City, when the Gobert thing happened?
Yeah.
Like, I was like, is this happening again right now? And obviously it was like a burst pipe or whatever. But what a week! Like, it was last year all over again. And it's
Mhm.
still going. Who knows who's going to be positive tomorrow? Who knows if this game's going to go off without a postponement? I'd
We'll see.
imagine Cleveland's in Boston already, and that would be like a stunning last minute thing. They're making teams sign these replacement players and just trying to get these games going through, which I don't think is a terrible idea. And like you said, from a content perspective in Boston, it's been fairly easy. Like, you're just finally seeing the bottom end players on the roster who aren't playing, and finally getting a chance to develop some rhythm, like Pritchard, like Neesmith. And listen, I always enjoy that. That is
That
always a good thing for me.
that is the part that I find disheartening or like disappointing, because if it was just like 3 players at a time, I think it'd be really interesting to see like the last game that the Cavs played. Yeah, Mobley was out, but they had Allen. They started Dean Wade with Lauri Markkanen and Dean Wade playing at the 3, and they started Lamar Stevens. And I was like, you know what? Like, this is a really good opportunity for those guys. They're moved in the starting lineup to keep the bench unit intact, so you still have Rubio, Love, and Jetty, who have kind of been that core bench unit that's really given them stability. If someone's going to make the Lamar Stevens, Dean Wade minutes work, it's going to be the rest of the starters, right? So like, there's an opportunity for those guys to win rotation minutes. Now you go to the current situation where Allen, Mobley, Ed Davis is out. Like, there's no big men. You have no shooting guards left, and you're trying to make it like, even Lamar Stevens is out. There's not a whole lot you can learn from that. It's really unfortunate. If Darius Garland tests positive for COVID, like it's a wrap for however long he's out. Like, it's unfortunate, but you know what? Like, I don't think you can survive Garland and Sexton being out from an offensive standpoint. Like, I think that's one of the biggest reasons why there's so much drop off when Garland's off the court, is you don't have Sexton out there to kind of help propel the scoring. So I'm continuing to knock on wood. Who knows? Like, that's the other thing. The guys that haven't tested positive, they may have been asymptomatic when there wasn't tests, and they may have caught it already, and that's why they're not out right now. Who
I
knows?
don't know.
It's crazy.
It's crazy, but Horford was in protocol to start the year. He's in it again now. Richardson was in it weeks ago, and he's in it now. He's the most rumored to be unvaccinated, and once again, a report came down that multiple Celtics are unvaccinated, so that obviously complicates
Jalen's
the effort
vaccinated,
here.
right?
I
He
don't know.
had some weird comments, and I was curious. I almost feel like the test of who's vaccinated and who's not is going to be who's able to travel to Canada now to
Oh,
play in Toronto.
absolutely, and they'll
That's
come up with a nonsense designation for why they're out.
Yeah, personal reasons. That's what it would really be. And
Yeah,
I know Boston already had a game in Toronto earlier before
they
that
do have
restriction.
another though.
Yeah, they had that, so maybe we'll find out then. But I'm not sure. I know for the Cavs perspective, everyone's vaccinated on the team. They said 65% of the league is already boosted. So hopefully,
Oh,
guys
that's
that
good.
test positive will be able to test negative quicker, being boosted, and hopefully we get
Listen,
out of
it's
this. Like,
complicated now too.
none of us want this. None of us want this shit.
No, and most of the league got J&J. There's debate or whatever it is about what, like, how long that lasts you, and different vaccines, and who people who got it early versus people who got it later, and how long that immunity is going to last.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it's even as complicated as vaccinated, unvaccinated, or as simple as vaccinated, unvaccinated now, like with the whole Kyrie thing. I think there's just a lot more stuff coming into the mix on that front. Now, you are up in Canada, though. What's going to happen with Toronto here? Because obviously Canada handles this at a different level than the U.S. does in terms of precautions and shutting things down. I already saw that you won't be able to eat or drink at Raptors games, which isn't a big deal, but it is something to
I
keep an eye on what's going to happen with that team.
I have no idea. I'm the
Yeah.
wrong Justin to ask when you're talking about policy in Canada. Yeah, I have no idea. I don't think the border is going to close. It never really closed. I would imagine that they would try to accommodate the sports leagues. We're just trying to figure out what the
It
hell
did in
happens.
Boston.
Yeah.
Vaccine mandate, vaccine mandate exempted the Celtics here.
Mhm.
No mask either required for the players, even though that was originally on the list. So
Yeah.
there we have it. We will continue covering it all, Justin, for Fear the Sword, as well as the Chase Down
No
pod.
Fear the Sword anymore.
Wow,
Just
when
the
did
Chase
that
Down
happen?
podcast. Start of the pandemic, I reduced my load a little bit and focused strictly on podcasting. So you can find the Chase Down podcast wherever you get your podcast. You can also find us on YouTube at the Cavs YouTube channel. We go live most of the time whenever Carter's available because he's the one that does that live producing. And I'm just here to talk and BS and do my thing.
Yeah, and provide some good commentary on the Cavs. Make sure you follow him tomorrow as the game is going on with at Cavsanada, Cavsanada. There you have it. I'll be tweeting as well throughout that. I might be there. I'll probably be there. There's a chance I'm not, so I'll let you all know about that as the game is hopefully going to go off without any issues, without any
Mhm.
alarms in
Yeah.
Boston and
Who
end this
knows?
big
Who
homestand.
knows? It's a long day for my high school and college playing days, but and maybe the Cavs give me a call. We're burning through the G League. Maybe I'm up next.
Let me see in the comments if you got any good names for replacement players. I love this game that we're playing here with that one. So fire away below. I'm seeing all the chatters come in here late with the title. I actually put the title as "Have the Cavs pass the Celtics long term" or something like that. So
Oh,
everyone's coming in with their comments. I don't think we even talked about that.
no, you didn't. Way to bury the lead, and the answer is of course yes.
Yeah. No,
I'm really like I would love a Cavs Celtics playoff series. I think that's a situation where usually kind of the best players have an edge. So I would factor that in. I think the Cavs, there's going to be a bit of a learning curve when they get to a postseason, but I would love that matchup. I would love to reignite that little rivalry that our teams have had. It's a weird rivalry for sure, but
I've
it's
never been to Cleveland. I guess I'll check it out.
oh, Bobby, let me tell you, you would like Cleveland. Cleveland is underrated. I've taken my wife there now twice. She's a craft beer snob and really enjoyed all the breweries. The food's great, nice walkable downtown. Gets cold, but I mean we're coming from Winnipeg, so we're it's balmy for us. But underrated city for sure.
All right, thoughts on Cleveland? Put those in the comments as well. Dome Theory
I'm
68.
sure those are going to be great from a Boston audience. I'm
We're,
sure it's going to be nothing but great things.
we are on iTunes. We're on Stitcher. Get the Chase Down as well. Subscribe to both these podcasts. Dome Theory. We might have one more before the end of the week, and then we'll take a little break early in the next week during the holidays. So enjoy, everybody. If we don't talk to you before then, of course, check out the Garden Report. We'll be live after Celtics Cavs tomorrow, and that is it. Boston Sports Journal. My piece is out on Tatum and Brown's playmaking, as well as Peyton Pritchard from the last game on CLNSmedia.com. So we will talk to you tomorrow. Justin, thank you again.
No problem. Thank you for